some great information to share with you. Just to make sure you're in the right place, today's session we will be discussing victim advocacy with our presenter, Ms. Isela Graells. But before we start our presentation, I would like to quickly mention that this session will be recorded so that you and those who have missed out on today's events will be able to come back to it later. Also, this event will provide Tejano passport points. We will post the code at the chat towards the end of the session. If you have any questions regarding Tejano passport points, how to log in, or if the code isn't working, just let us know at the end of the session. We'll be happy to help you out. So now, please, at this time, mute your mics for the best sound experience. Otherwise, the feedback could interfere with information we're about to share. Without further ado, I will introduce our presenter, Ms. Isela Graells. She is an author, a victim advocate, and a former supervisor for the Victim Services, Domestic Abuse, and Elderly Abuse Unit of the El Paso Police Department. And she continues to advocate independently. And we thank her for coming and doing this presentation for us today. So I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you. Thank you for having me back. I really appreciate the invitation to continue to do these Tejano virtual events. Today, as you mentioned, Ms. Ornelas, I will be speaking about victim advocacy, and not just about what victim advocacy is, but what it can do for victims of crime, and also maybe to inspire a few victim advocates out there that they don't know that they want to be advocates, but maybe today they will be inspired to become advocates for victims of crime. So without further ado, let me just explain. I'm not going to overwhelm you with definitions or statistics. I think it's more important that we have an organic conversation about what victim advocacy is and what an advocate is responsible for. So let us begin with the before, the during, and the after. So what is victim advocacy? Very quickly, not a formal definition, but basically from my experience, back in the day when I was with the El Paso Police Department 100 years ago, victim advocacy was known, mockingly labeled as the hand-holding unit of law enforcement. And they're not wrong. We are the people who are out there at crime scenes or at hospitals or anywhere we are needed. We're the ones who are providing the emotional support for victims, and we are holding their hand when they need it. So there's no shame in that. We are the hand holders and proud to be. But victim advocacy, I like to see it as a bridge between victims of crime and their families and the judicial process. When you become a victim of crime, it is very easy to be lost in the judicial process. So victim advocates are there as a guide. Victim advocates are trained professionals, whether they are paid employees or volunteers. And these are highly trained, certified people who can provide crisis intervention. And we have a whole list here on the slide of the scope of duties of an advocate, some of the scope of duties. There's too many to list, but some of the most important ones are, of course, like I said, crisis intervention, emotional support. They're the ones who know referrals and resources in the community that can assist a victim of crime. They're the ones who will protect the rights, the legal rights of a victim and their families. They're the ones who are going to guide the victim through like I said, through the criminal justice system. The before I think is more important. Well, not more important, but it is as important as the during and the after. The before is prevention. So how does an advocate provide prevention, or if that's the word, by spreading community awareness. And last but not least, providing victims of crime with safety planning. Now, we're going to go more in detail with safety planning, but again, very important. Awareness, safety planning, vital. So what type of cases are managed by victim advocates in our local law enforcement and judicial agencies? We have a list here. From this list, I don't know if you can conclude, these are all crimes that happen to a person. to a person's person. So these are crimes against the person. Very rarely will you find resources for victims of property crimes. There's not a lot we have in the community that will assist someone that was a victim of property theft or even identity theft. I know the law enforcement and the advocacy communities are working towards providing more resources for those types of crimes. But here, most of these crimes involved injury to a person or the death of a person. So we have traffic fatalities, assaults, domestic and dating violence, sexual assaults and rape, child abuse, elderly abuse. Elderly abuse is one of those crimes that is very prevalent in our community, terrifyingly underreported, especially the financial abuse of our elderly, and we'll touch more on that. Animal abuse. Sometimes animal abuse is used as a form of domestic violence, and I'll discuss that with you as well. Stalking. People might think, well, if you're being stalked, are you being hurt? Uh, Emotional violence, psychological violence can leave deeper scars than physical violence at times. So stalking is one of those crimes that we take very seriously. And I'll do a little game with you, if I may. How many of you in the audience? I don't know how many people we have in the audience, but those of you in the audience, those of you on part of the faculty, how many of you right here, right now, this moment, know if you're being stalked? I'll give you a few seconds. Think about it. How many of you know right now if you are being stalked by someone? Those of you who know if you have a stalker, that's because your stalker wanted for you to know. Those of us who cannot answer, we don't know if we have a stalker because our stalker has decided not to let us know yet. Now, hopefully I'm speculating, but that's how um, dangerous crimes of stalking can be. Um, we have cases of stalking that have even become fatal. So, and then of course homicide. Homicides or any unattended death. When I was back in the police department, the code was a 65, and a 65 simply meant that we were going to a crime scene where there was an unattended death. That is a death that happened outside a hospital, and it's going to be treated as a homicide until the officers can prove otherwise. And then I have asterisks here with suicide. Suicide is attempting suicide can land you in handcuffs. Some people say, well, you're taking your own life. Why is that a crime? It's not necessarily that it's a crime. It's just that if you're a danger to yourself, you might be a danger to others. So while suicide is not a crime that can be prosecuted, it's still a very emotional, distressing situation. By the way, if you or someone you know is experiencing tendencies or experiencing feelings that if you're contemplating suicide, please, by all means, reach out to an advocate. They have great information. Prevention is the name of the game. And I always like to tell people, look, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Life is full of problems. That's what keeps it exciting. I know if I didn't have something to fix or solve, I'd be bored. But please, if you are contemplating suicide or you know someone that might be, reach out to an advocate immediately. Immediately. If one advocate doesn't provide the assistance you need, reach out to another one and to another one, and we'll go over referrals in a minute. So the before, again, here we are, prevention. Advocates are responsible for providing training and awareness throughout the community, not just law enforcement, but also medical staff. We go to hospitals. We go to different law enforcement agencies. In my time, I visited every type of law enforcement agency you can imagine and any agency that would have me. I even visited the military base here in El Paso at Fort Bliss, talked to hundreds, thousands of soldiers. We also went to every high school, middle school, elementary school, higher learning education institute. We went to different religious organizations, different churches, senior centers, and of course, any community organization that would have us, because again, awareness, prevention. I was watching a movie not too long. I'm not a huge movie watcher, but this movie caught my eye. It's called Spotlight. And in this movie, an attorney who's an advocate for child abuse victims was explaining to a reporter that it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to abuse one. What did he mean by that? When the community sits back, stays silent, and does nothing, we might as well be contributing to the abuse. So when we become aware, when we are educated, we learn how to prevent things, we learn how to look out for things, and we learn how to report them. So very important. Um, Victim advocacy is pretty young. It goes back to uh, early or mid 1980s, and people might say that's not young. Yeah, it is. It is because we've had victims throughout the history of the world, and we've only had victim advocates for a short period of time. So here in El Paso, I believe it was in the mid 1990s when we started coming together as a community, both law enforcement and civilians, and victim advocacy was born. We've come a long way. We come a long way. I know sometimes the community feels like they're on the other side of law enforcement, but in El Paso, we are very fortunate. We are very blessed to have the police department we do. I worked with them, and yes, I've heard the arguments, but this officer did this, and this. Yes, you're going to hear about the officer that did something wrong. You're rarely going to hear about the officer that risked his or her life to save someone else. I was instructed to go to the police academy and train officers back when. So I know that we've come a long way since then. Our officers are better equipped, even to recognize mental health problems, and they're better equipped with information to refer people for help and to reach out for help. So again, I went to the academy and I trained both new cadets that were becoming officers and seasoned police officers. And let me tell you, these people, these men and women were ready, willing, and receptive to learn how to be not only better officers, but better advocates. Also, our district attorney's office, our county attorney's office, our sheriff's office, um, they're very pro-victim. Again, if you had a bad experience with law enforcement, please don't generalize. Don't generalize. Reach out to another one and another one and another one. I think that we live in a world right now where generalities, if that's a word, if it isn't, I just invented it, so you're welcome. But we live in a world where generalities have taken over, and we cannot assume everybody's the same. Again, I can tell you from personal experience, we have tremendous law enforcement officials who are genuinely wanting to serve and protect. So reach out to your officers, reach out to your victim advocates. Now, we already had the before. Now let's go into the during. Imagine if. So we're all individuals, and our imaginations are as individual as our fingerprints. So I'm going to leave this up to you, but imagine you are a victim of the worst crime, something that you consider the worst crime can happen to you. I'm going to give you a very simple one: traffic accident with injuries. You have the initial shock. when people are in a car accident, they literally don't know what hit them, literally and metaphorically. You don't know how many people I've met throughout my life, and I've been here 51 years now, so that's a long time. But in my lifetime, I've met so many people who just know how they're gonna react when something bad happens. You don't. I promise you, you don't. I can't tell you how many times I was dispatched to a traffic fatality or a traffic accident, and people were standing around looking lost because it's very confusing. You have questions, and then you come to the realization that now you're injured. Your car is totaled. What? What now? What do you do now? There's fear, anger, sorrow. And again, the question, the repeating question, now what? Well, now you have an ally. Now you have a victim advocate. So from the moment a crime occurs, from the moment something bad happens to you, and from the moment you decide that you're going to report it, your life is going to change. And the life of your loved ones is going to change along with yours. Whether it's as something as I guess, I mean, in the scale of crime and terrible crimes and not so terrible crimes, it doesn't matter if someone snatched away your purse. How many of us carry our life in our purse? I cannot see you raise your hands, but if you can identify and relate to what I'm saying, you know what it's like when you lose your purse or when someone steals your purse. So from the moment someone steals your purse to the moment someone murders your loved one, your life is going to change. And that is when victim advocates are the most vital. Because if you don't know a crime occurred, a lot of people don't know that they're being victimized. You have no idea how many people are not aware that they are being victimized. So again, awareness. Advocate will help you prevent, I'm sorry, an advocate will help you report a crime. They will help you understand the process of the investigation. You don't know how many times I had people call my office, come into my office. I go see them at their house, and the number one question, I don't know if any of you can guess, the number one question from these victims, from the victims' families, was always, how come the police aren't doing anything? What's going on? Why don't they care about what happened? I assure you, law enforcement cares. Believe me, if nothing else, they want to get the bad guy or the bad person more than you do, because it's a matter of justice. So understanding the process of the investigation is very important. Sometimes victims do not want to talk to law enforcement for many different reasons. So they'll talk to a victim advocate. As a supervisor, I had amending authority, which means that if a report had been uh, filed, I could add an amendment to that report, and usually I would. Whenever I go talk to a victim and the victim had more information, I would add it to the report, make a stronger report, make a stronger case, make a stronger prosecution. And again, a lot of victims don't understand the process of the prosecution. The courts don't care. The judges don't care. The district attorney doesn't care. Believe me, they do. They do. Um, I even though I don't watch movies, I'm gonna give you another quote, uh, and I don't remember the movie for the life of me. But in this movie, this man explains how most people in law enforcement are there because they couldn't find another job. That's wrong. That's wrong. I can tell you that most people in law enforcement, most people in the judicial system are there because they want to make a difference. Do we have people that don't care? Yeah, like in every profession, you're going to have teachers that don't care. You're going to have nurses that don't care. You're going to have doctors that don't care. It's going to happen. You know, you're going to have advocates that we're hoping their human resources or their human services or their social work degree could have been used some other way. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not here to sugarcoat or hide anything from you. I am a victim advocate, so I'm going to tell you, yes, you will find people like that. But for the most part, the people who are helping you and trying to work with you, they care. They do. In fact, some of them care a little too much, and that hinders them. I was told when I went through my training, different trainings, I have many trainings, to become an advocate and to maintain yourself as an advocate, you have to continue education. You have to constantly be training. And in many of my trainings, I was told, Gloria, don't take it too personal. That's that's not my constitution. That's not who I am. I take things very personal, very personally, especially injustice. I don't have any tolerance for bullies. Zero tolerance for bullies. I don't suffer fools. I don't suffer bullies. So when people are bullying other people, I take it very personally. So again, they do care and they're going to be there for you through the whole process, especially if there's a conviction or an acquittal. Sometimes defendants do get acquitted. If they're convicted, they will be sentenced. Some people might ask, well, why do you need an advocate for sentencing? I mean, that's the end of the case. Believe it or not, there's people who need who need victim advocacy even through the sentencing of the person who hurt them or hurt their loved one. A lot of people develop compassion or maybe pity for the defendant. I've seen it where people actually get up and forgive the defendant. That's when they need the most support. Let's say someone is sentenced to the death penalty. Again, not going to be political. I have no opinion to give you. I have facts. When I have an opinion, I will preface it by saying my humble opinion. But in this case, let me give you some facts. Death penalty, it takes a long time. It is exhausting and heart-wrenching. Whether you are for it or against it, let me just tell you that the death penalty is not quick. A death penalty always comes accompanied by, I think, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think here in Texas, I think it's 5 appeals. And every appeal is not only lengthy, but costly. And again, if you're a victim of a crime and you feel that your assailant, your aggressor deserves to die, you have every right to believe that. But I can tell you that even by the time you get to an execution date, victims and their families, or if the victim is no longer with us, their families are gonna need advocacy. It is a heart-wrenching process, and it takes a long time. I'll give you an example, and I think most of us are going to be familiar with this example. Without going into very deep detail, uh, Alexandra F. was 5 years old. She was kidnapped from Walmart. She was assaulted and murdered. And I believe this happened back in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 2002. I was still at El Paso Community College. I was about to graduate from the criminal justice program, and I was completing an internship with a police department. And I remember the victim advocates talking about the case, and it had taken its toll on everybody involved, everybody, especially the family. But it was 20 years, I think, before that defendant was put to death. And even then, the family needed advocacy. Um, for better details, I think Stephanie Valle did a piece on that case. You can look it up. I think it's Channel 7, if I'm not mistaken. So let's say someone is convicted to a 20-year sentence, but they are released early. Victim advocacy doesn't stop at conviction and at sentencing. And I'll give you an example a little later on. But again, even if the person is being released, the person who hurt you is being released or pardoned. Nowadays we live in the era of just people being pardoned, which means they're done. They're free of anything that is attached to that case. So I can tell you that when justice is interrupted in any way, the healing process for the victim and their families is interrupted. There's no way around that. So again, we were talking about the most prevalent cases in our community: domestic and dating violence, traffic fatalities, sexual assault and rape, and of course, elderly abuse. And elderly abuse includes everything from violence, physical violence, to sexual assault, to financial abuse, neglect. Uh, we are a very friendly, compassionate, we're a good community, but for some reason, our elderly continue to be left behind. We have work to do. We have work to do as a community. So, of the ones I just showed you, of the cases I just showed you, which one do you think goes most underreported and is least prosecuted? I'll give you a few seconds. If you want to answer, you may, but think about it. Which one goes most underreported? That's a good one. And you're right. You're right. Elderly abuse is very underreported, but there's one that even beats elderly abuse. That's another one. That's another one, but it's domestic violence. Now, to be fair, I wasn't fair to you because I asked you a very broad question, and this is a very broad spectrum. Domestic violence includes all of those, and it is grossly, terrifyingly underreported and underprosecuted. Now, for the shameless plug, okay? For the shameless plug, this is an excerpt from my novel, In the Darkness of the Pecan Groves. Domestic violence cases are some of the most common, but they are also some of the most difficult to prosecute. Victims often recant their stories after reporting the abuse for a number of reasons. So these cases are sometimes dropped by the court, not to mention that these calls are also some of the most dangerous for officers. This is Lieutenant Margarita Navarro explaining to another officer why this is I believe Lieutenant Navarro is actually explaining why domestic violence cases are so underreported. And the truth of the matter is that, again, some people don't know that they're being abused. We had many cases of that. It was not until we went to schools or churches or community centers when we would give a presentation on domestic violence, and then after the presentation, someone would come up and say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that was abuse. I just thought that was normal." Also, believe it or not, the reasons why domestic and dating violence cases are so underreported are as vast as the number of victims. If you have a victim of domestic violence, you have an individual reason why they're not reporting. As many victims as you have, that's as many reasons as you're going to have. And these reasons are very difficult for other people to understand. We, like I said, we live in a very compassionate community, but we also live in a community that, for lack of a better description, lacks mirrors. For some reason, we do not ever see ourselves in the other person. And when I think of victims, I think of many things. One of the things that comes to mind is the victim is holding up a mirror to us, but we're very good about saying, "Oh, that would never happen to me." Why would they stay? Do they like getting hit? Maybe they like the abuse because they like making up. Or, pues yo ya me hubiera ido. I would have left. Victims of domestic and dating violence are often blamed for the abuse. They're ridiculed for it. They're even told to minimize it. There's a movie by, check out the person that never watches movies. There's a movie by brilliant man, Tyler Perry, and there's this character Medea, and I'm not sure what the movie is, but this girl is about to get married, and her mom and she are having lunch, and she says, "Mom, he beats me." And she says, "Well, you got to stop doing whatever it is you're doing to make him beat you." You'd be surprised how many family members will convince the victim that maybe he or she are bringing this upon themselves. Who's going to want to report if they're going to be ridiculed or blamed? Again, prevention, awareness. Safety plan. So, touching a little on domestic violence and a safety plan. Safety plans are vital. They are as vital as the air the victim breathes. Why? Because leaving an abusive relationship is one of the most dangerous times for a victim. It has proven to be fatal, and I have a number of cases that support this claim. Unfortunately, number of cases. So you may ask yourself, how deadly? How deadly can it be? How deadly can it be to leave a domestic violence situation, especially abruptly? So I didn't want to touch on cases here in the community for respect for the victims and the families. I can talk about the cases in broad terms, but for more general idea, there's two movies. One of them is A Cry for Help. This is from the 1980s, and it's the Tracy Thurman story. If you are triggered easily, even if you're not triggered easily, it is a hard movie to watch. Tracy Thurman is a real person. It's a real story. In fact, it was such a horrific case of domestic violence, stalking, sexual abuse, domestic violence, that when it was over, it changed the way the laws work. Just a little synopsis, very quick. The incident that triggered the Tracy Thurman story into changing law was when her estranged husband attacked her in the front lawn of their house. Again, he had been estranged, but he wouldn't leave her alone. And on this day, he attacked her so severely, stabbed her numerous times, stomped on her, jumped on her, broke many bones in her body, stabbed her face numerous times, all while police officers of the city of Torrington, Connecticut, stood and watched. Now, people watch the movie or they hear about the kids and they're furious at the police officers. You have to understand that law enforcement are only as effective as the laws that govern them. And in this point in time, in the 1980s, in Torrington, Connecticut, law enforcement was limited by their policies and procedures and the laws of the city of Torrington and the state of Connecticut. So they couldn't cross the threshold onto the Thurman's lawn to save her or to stop him. It was not until Mr. Thurman got tired of beating on his wife that he took a little break. The paramedics were able to drag Tracy away from the lawn, put her on a gurney, put her in the ambulance. Mr. Thurman got a second wind and he came after the paramedics. When he stepped off his property and went after the paramedics to attack them and continue to attack Tracy, the officers arrested him. The officers will tell you. I mean, they gave numerous accounts on how they wish they would have stopped him, but the law prohibited. Thanks to her help, we have new laws, we have better laws. But if you want to look up the movie, just be warned, it's very hard to see. Another one that is very heartbreaking, and I haven't been able to watch it in a long time. It's No One Would Tell. I believe it's with Candace Cameron from Full House, the actress, very beautiful actress. She plays the part of Amy Carnival or Carnivale. I'm not sure of the pronunciation. She was 14 years old, and in 1991, this is in Massachusetts, her boyfriend, her 16-year-old boyfriend, Jamie Fuller, killed her. And Amy was a lot like a lot of teenage girls in dating violence relationships. She made excuses for the violence. She justified the violence. She felt sorry for him. She usually justified him because he had such a rough childhood, and he was struggling, and so on and so forth. And if I had $1 for every time a teenager tells me, Miss Gloria, you don't understand, he's actually a very sweet person. He's very kind. It's just that I need to understand him better. Or, Miss Gloria, you don't understand. She's actually a really nice person. But I need to stop doing whatever it is I'm doing to pick at her so that she won't react the way she does. Ladies and gentlemen, it cuts both ways. It used to be domestic violence was a female issue. Females are as aggressive as men can be, maybe even more so. We have cases that prove that and support that. But after a very abusive relationship, and after Amy decided she was going to break up with Jamie, he convinced her to come back one more time and just be friends. Just be friends. And that's when he killed her. And Jamie had a what I would like to call a support system, a fan club. A lot of the girls that liked Jamie sided with him. They justified him. They were angry at Amy for provoking him. It was almost as if they thought that she deserved it. So we've come a long way. We're not there yet. We have a lot to learn. But if you want to look up No One Would Tell, again, this is from the 90s. It's very difficult to watch. Just fair warning. Incidentally, so is my book. My book is a difficult read. It has a trigger sticker. So if ever you're interested, just be warned that it's a difficult read. So again, here we are, safety plan. Because you can't just leave like that. Believe it or not, there's people who have done it and good on them, good for them. But most of the time, when a victim of domestic violence, female, male, however you identify, when a victim decides to leave, it is very dangerous. Most of them leave and come back at least an average of 7 times. And they either leave for good or unfortunately they die. We have a lot of instances here in El Paso. Unfortunately, I have to say that in my time, I got to see it. And every time it happened, it was unbelievable to me. The shock never goes away. But this is a safety plan. I'm gonna leave the presentation like Ms. Ornella stated before, so that it is available to you or to whoever you think might need it. For further advice, please reach out to a victim advocate. But again, practice how to get out of your home safely. Identify a neighbor that you can call or that will call authorities when they hear a disturbance. Talk to your friends, your family, devise a plan, devise a code, use good judgment. And don't ever think that you know your aggressor. You don't know how many people told me how they knew this person better than anyone. And they knew that person would never hurt them. And then I would get a call from dispatch that said otherwise. Another underreported crime, as it was stated before by one of the people in the audience, sexual assault. Again, the shameless plug, excerpt from In the Darkness of the Pecan Groves. Ana Rosa had been sitting quietly on a chair in the corner of the examination room. She had her feet on the seat of the chair. Her knees were pressed to her chest. Her left arm was wrapped around her legs, and the fingers of her right hand were barely touching her lips. Occasionally, she would bite on her broken nails. Most victims of sexual assault experience shock as a result of the attack and usually appear as being uncooperative. I'm not going to read the rest, it's kind of long, but believe it or not, in this wonderful community of ours, where we come together when we need to. We still have a long ways to go when it comes to sexual assault. I would like to say that most of us are sympathetic or empathetic or compassionate of sexual assault victims, but there's still a group of people that think that victims of sexual assault are basically asking for it. Again, just like domestic violence victims, victims of rape or any other type of sexual assault are usually blamed for the assault. They are shamed for being raped because some people think they let it happen. I was on a panel. It was an expert panel. Someone considered me an expert. I don't know. That should tell you a little bit about them. But I don't. I don't think I've ever been an expert on anything. But I was on an expert panel, and not a long time ago. Again, this is when I was sharing my meals with dinosaurs. But on this panel, we also had a pastor, and a pastor says, "Well, it cannot be rape cannot be worse than murder." That falls under the category of assumptions because of a personal opinion. My humble, personal, experienced opinion is that whenever I was dispatched to an unattended death, whether it was a homicide or any type of death, I could see the deceased person, whether they were, please forgive the expression, hanging from a tree, still hanging from a tree, or they were spread across the pavement. They looked done. There was no movement, there was no breath, there was no reaction. They were done. They died once. I can tell you from working with victims of sexual assault that a victim of rape will die 1,000 deaths 1,000 times. It is something that you can heal from, but will never completely go away. And to assume that it is not as bad as dying is basically minimizing how that victim feels. Even if you have been a victim of sexual assault yourself, you will never know how the victim of rape sitting next to you feels. The pastor was making an argument for something that has nothing to do with this, and we're not going to touch on that today. But the argument was made that it was not so bad, and maybe these, with some help, the victims could get over it. I wish it was that simple. I wish I could sit here and tell you most of the victims I assisted got over it so quickly and they are thriving. Some are. Some are, but you know what made a difference? An advocate. An advocate. If ever you've considered a career in helping your community, consider victim advocacy. We could really use you. Protective orders versus restraining orders. So a lot of people get these confused, and unfortunately people go and apply for a restraining order when they need a protective order, and then when law enforcement cannot enforce the restraining order, people get angry and they become desperate, and then they get hopeless, and then they stop trying. Protective order is the kind of document, or is the kind of order that does incur criminal penalties. Okay, so if someone violates an emergency protective order or a protective order, that which is emergency protective order, lasts from 30 to 90 days. A permanent, or what they call a permanent, it's not really permanent, protective order can last from 1 to 2 to maybe even 5 years. There's some that have even been given for 10 years. Tracy Thurman is one of the cases where she had her protective order for life. That's how bad her case was. But if someone violates a protective order, whether it's temporary, emergency, or otherwise, they will incur criminal penalties. They will go to jail. They will be arrested. Restraining order is mostly for civil cases. Actually, it's for civil cases, and it's used in divorces. to protect property. People are going to get divorced and they start hiding money or they start hiding stuff. And so a judge will probably give you a restraining order so that nothing is touched. The assets are not touched. Also, business disputes. Businesses might get a restraining order to keep you away from their business. You're no longer allowed to go to Starbucks because you complained about your latte way too many times. So now they have a restraining order on you. Legal consequences of restraining order are mostly civil penalties. It takes a lot for a judge to say, okay, you know what, after 20 times of you violating this restraining order, I'm going to have you arrested or I'm going to have you fined. So please, please, if you are a victim of a violent crime, if you feel that your aggressor is still a threat to you and you are in imminent danger, please apply for a protective order. Reach out to an advocate. They are trained. They are trained in the process. They will help you through it. Now, back in my day, another lifetime ago, I got in a little trouble. As the supervisor of the victim services unit, I was also kind of like the unofficial spokesperson. So El Paso Times, sorry, you know what? I'm not sure if it was El Paso Times or El Diario del Paso. One of the newspapers asked for an interview because we had a case involving a protective order. And I made a statement at the time. It was an emotional statement. I don't regret making the statement. I think it was factual. But my commander did, he didn't really reprimand me, but he did say, you know, Gloria, let's not do that. Let's not say those things in the future. The damage had been done. I was asked, how effective is a protective order? So I answered, it's only as effective as the victim is willing. If you have a protective order and you're going to invite your aggressor back home to have dinner because you're working things out, your protective order is not going to save you. It's not going to protect you. It's not going to be effective. If you are of the mind that you know your aggressor better than anyone and there's no way they're going to hurt you, and you feel confident in that, I'm just going to tell you that what I told the newspaper that day, a protective order is not bulletproof. In order for a protective order to work, you have to work with it. And that's why you need an advocate. So the advocate can assist you in understanding how it works, and that way it works the best that it can for you. The case that we were talking about with the newspaper that day was not a police case, but because I was deemed a field authority. I don't know who called me that. That says a lot about them. But because since I was deemed someone who was knowledgeable in the subject, I was the one interviewed. You would think the universe would pick me to win the lottery. No, they picked me to be interviewed. So what happened on that day is that morning, it was a morning, I believe it was a Friday morning, a victim who was being assisted by sheriff's office out in the county got her protective order that morning. And she told her father, I'm just going to go back home and pick up my stuff. And I believe her father urged her not to. Forget about your stuff. We'll go back later. Please leave it alone. Nothing's going to happen to me. I know him better than anyone. Even now that I have a protective order, he's not going to risk getting into trouble. He didn't care. Unfortunately, he murdered her. And later I heard through the grapevine, like I said, I cannot support these claims. I cannot support these rumors. But I heard some people were saying that he even took the protective order itself and pinned it to her chest where he stabbed her. I don't know if that's true or not. All I can tell you is that she was now dead. And people were questioning the power of protective orders. Again, it's only effective. It's only as effective as you are willing. So advocacy begins at home. And when I mean home, I mean your home. Talk to your family members. Advocate for each other. Protect each other. Be compassionate with each other. If it is at home that you are being victimized, then reach out to advocates. They're here for you. In fact, here at El Paso Community College, you have a terrific police department that you can reach out to, and you have EPCC Cares. You also have EPCC Stay Strong Emergency Fund. All of these people involved in these programs are willing and hoping they can help you. Reach out. Reach out to faculty. Reach out to classmates. Tell the janitor. Tell someone. If you are being victimized and people are not listening, keep asking for help. Keep telling people. Someone's bound to listen to you. What is the saying? The squeaky wheel gets the oil. Be the squeaky wheel. If you're afraid that you're bothering people because you're calling them too often, okay, so fine, be annoying. I enjoy being annoying. I'm the kind that will call you until I get the assistance that I need. It's made me very popular at parties. Haven't been invited to a party in a long time. It's okay. I like my alone time. But here we have, even in a community that is flawed and that still has a long ways to go, we still have very strong community. We have advocates here on this list that's what they're doing. They're wanting to help you. So I think that's my cue to hurry it up. So I will. But here's the list. I'm going to leave the list for you. And then again, here is the El Paso Police Department. This is the information from the Victim Services Response Team Unit. This is the units of officers that assist in these particular cases. And this is the phone numbers for your victim advocates. These are all certified. These are trained, certified people who know how to help you and want to help you. Now, the after. Sometimes the case goes beyond the resolution. We were talking about elderly abuse and how elderly abuse goes terrifyingly unreported as well. How we have forgotten our elderly. Not all of us, but some of us. And one of the things that goes terribly underreported is the financial abuse of our elderly, especially by family members. In this case, we have the case of a contractor. Now, Daniel B. and the 750 plus theft that was felt throughout the El Paso, Texas community. This guy was presumably a contractor. He go to the homes of elderly people and offer services for renovation, maintenance, renovation, home renovation. He would take money from these elderly people, and he would sometimes show up and do half the job. Sometimes he would just show up to demolish the kitchen or the bathroom or a wall, and then he would never come back again. When Daniel B. was arrested, he was charged with 34 counts of fraud. That's the 34 counts of the people who actually reported him. This guy had a record as long as my arm. And he had gotten away with so much. 34 cases. Number 34 was my mother. So this hits home. My mother hired him to do contractual work, renovation. He took my mother's money. He even went as far as to steal from her own credit card. Anyway, long story short, Daniel B. Actually, the last time I spoke to Daniel B. on the phone, I told him, I said, Mr. B., I am a victim advocate. I'm asking you, please return my mother's money. And he said, do whatever you want. You can't touch me. I have lawyers. Talk to my lawyers. You can do shit. Excuse the language. Sorry about that. But that's what he said. He says, do whatever you want. And he hung up on me. Before he hung up on me, I told him, I said, Mr. B, please, I'm a victim advocate. If I go and advocate for victims that I don't know, you don't think I'm going to advocate for my own mother? And he said, do whatever you want. You can't touch me. And he hung up on me. So he continued to steal. After he stole here in El Paso, he went to Colorado, stole some more. He went to New Mexico, stole some more. Colorado arrested him and sent him back to El Paso. So he spent some time, several months, in our county jail. He was sure that he was going to beat this case, like he had beat so many others. When his public defender, not his bunch of lawyers like he had boasted, no, his public defender looked at the case, at the 34 counts, and when the attorney saw how willing the victims and the victims' families, the police detectives, the county attorney's office, the district attorney's office, all the advocates who were there at every hearing, how willing they were to prosecute him. Needless to say, on December 9th, I believe, Mr. B pleaded guilty to 34 counts of fraud, equaling over $750,000. The judge sentenced him to 13 years in prison, but not before he allowed the victims to deliver a victim impact statement. My mother was number 34. When I tell you victim advocacy becomes personal, I'm not exaggerating. You can almost hear the knot in my throat. It does get very personal. I was never more proud of my mom because my mother is, she was born here in the United States, just like my father, just like my grandparents. But her first language is Spanish. It didn't matter. The judge was very patient and wonderful. The victim advocates stood next to her. The translator translated for my mother, but she stood there and very confidently, here she is in her mid-70s, skinny, short. She might as well have been 7 feet tall the way she turned to look at him and the way she talked to him. And she very, very, very sternly said to him, Mr. B, remember when you told my daughter to do whatever the heck she wanted? We couldn't touch you. You had lawyers. Remember that when you're serving your 13 years. Is the case over then? No. A few months after Mr. B was sent to prison, he was quickly eligible for parole or even a pardon. So again, I geared up and became a victim advocate. And I reached out to the victim advocate in San Angelo, working directly with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I reached out to our county attorney's office with our county attorney, Cristina Sanchez, wonderful, amazing human being. Reached out to our district attorney, wonderful, Mr. James Montoya. Reached out to anyone who would hear me and give me the time of day. And together we started writing letters to the parole board. And we crossed our fingers and we said our prayers and we believed together for justice, because 34 counts of fraud is ridiculous, but it's even more horrifying when you think that the victims were all in their late 60s, 70s, 80s. We even had a victim in her 90s. Some of these people had to go back to work because they lost their entire retirements. Some people lost their homes. So we had victims working back at Walmart or any place that would take them. And now this guy was going to be released early. So here we were working, making phone calls, writing letters. Again, the after goes beyond the case. So I am very, very proud to say that just yesterday, Thursday, October 23rd, 2025, early morning, Mr. Daniel B. was denied parole. So the knot in my throat is not just a sign of emotion. It can also mean a sign of vicarious trauma. It happens to all victim advocates, which is why whenever I can, I remind victim advocates to self-care. Some victim advocates don't even know they're suffering from a vicarious trauma. It's something that is very present. Sometimes we deny it, sometimes we ignore it. But because this fight becomes so personal, we end up feeling, not only for our victims, we end up feeling what our victims are feeling. We take it home with us. Even our families might present some of the symptoms. I remember I had no idea I was experiencing vicarious trauma until a chaplain with the El Paso Police Department took me aside and said, Gloria, you're not well. Um, Needless to say, I had started working at the police department when I think I was 26 years old. I weighed maybe 130 pounds. So 100 pounds later, there I was with my vicarious trauma, eating my feelings, not sleeping well. So please, advocacy is not for everyone, but if you think that you have what it takes to be a hero, for someone else, and you want to become an advocate, self-care. Self-care. It always reminds me of when I'm flying and the flight attendant says, if in case of an emergency, a mask is going to fall from above your seat, please, it's an oxygen mask. Please place the mask on yourself first and then help the person next to you. You cannot help anyone. You cannot advocate for anyone if you cannot breathe. So I always describe the case managers in my unit and the volunteers, the victim services response team volunteers in my unit. At that time, I think I had 83 volunteers that were certified and ready to assist. In fact, I'm proud to say my husband was one of them. When he saw how important this job was to me, he joined victim services. I still remember the evening he walked into my office. He brought me dinner because he assumed I hadn't eaten, and he was right. I had not eaten. It was 9 p.m. It was a tough day. He handed me the bag from Whataburger, and which is probably not the best thing to eat when you're not practicing self-care. But he also handed me an application, and I saw the folded document. I thought, I hope these aren't divorce papers because I'm never home. It was his application, and he went through the training. I was not easy on him. I think I was tougher on him than anybody else because I didn't want anyone else to say I was giving him special treatment. He's become an amazing advocate. I was asked to describe my case managers and my volunteers one time by my commander, and I said, well, they don't wear a cape, but they carry a radio, and they wear a blue polo, and those are our superheroes. I'm very proud of our advocates from every agency. So if you think you have it in you, by God, please um, join us. Join us. We can use it. We can use the help. When anybody asks you, so what did you learn from this lady that rambled on for over an hour? What is victim advocacy and what does an advocate do? Just remind them, victim advocacy is a refuge for victims. It's a lifeline. A victim advocate is a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. It's it's more than hand holding, but we are proudly holding the hands of those who need it. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Sorry we ran late. I don't know if anybody has time for questions. I know we went past the time, but if you have any questions, I'm here. If not, please reach out to an advocate if you need to. If you have questions on how to become a victim advocate, if look at the slides, there's a lot of information. And please take care of yourselves and take care of each other.
Well, thank you, Ms. Graells. That was a very powerful presentation. Really appreciate you coming over and doing that for us. Are there any questions? If you want to ask a question, there's a chat. You can also raise your hand and speak, use the microphone.
Um, I believe that her name is Yesenia. It
Mhm.
was very difficult, but it was also very empowering that it was my mom, my sister, and myself that we just joined together and we reported this guy. We continued to follow up on the case, and it was very empowering. Now, my job as a victim advocate was also very difficult for my family. In fact, my mother was always very worried about me. And it's funny because, we drive a unit. It's an unmarked unit, and we have a radio. We don't have a firearm because we're not officers. We're civilians. But I remember it would be like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would call my mom, and she would answer, and I would say, "Mom, how do I get here? Do you know how to get here?" Because my mom knows every street in El Paso. She's lived here all her life, so she knows every corner of El Paso. And she was always very supportive, but she used to say, I worry because you speak on behalf of victims, and some people are not gonna like that. And true story, I was threatened more than once, and I always said, I'm in God's hands. And I trust the police department. I trust our law enforcement. They will protect me as much as they can. But both the case and the advocacy, yes, they were difficult on my family. But I have a very supported network. Thank you, Yesenia. Yes, like I mentioned, he is going to be doing his time, and I don't want him to suffer. If that makes sense. I honestly believe in rehabilitating people. Sooner or later, they're going to be reintegrated into society. So while they're in there, I want them to rehabilitate so that we can live with it, and they can learn to live with us again. So I I'm glad he's in there because I'm hoping that he will use this time uh, for his most good. I also believe in justice. I believe firmly in justice, and sometimes justice requires people going to prison. I am an advocate for justice, and the healing process doesn't begin until the victim gets justice. And that's not political, that's just advocacy.
So once again, thank you, Ms. Graells, for sharing. We really appreciate it. Um, I hope this inspired advocacy in others. Are there any more questions or comments? So while we wait, oh,
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate your attendance and your time and your patience. And I'm sorry again if I rambled on. I become very passionate when it comes to victim advocacy. It's something I enjoy, but I'm glad. I'm glad it helped you. I hope it helps you, and I hope it helps your loved ones. If you know, again, if you know of anyone that needs help, they're not. Some people might not recognize that they need help. You know, again, it takes a lot for a victim of domestic violence to leave that relationship. Um, we've come a long way. We now know how the cycle of violence works. We now know how we can spread awareness. We now know how to help. Um, you have to remember though, and if I may, just very quickly, the power, the protective orders, the advocacy, law enforcement, the orders from a court are only as effective as the victim allows them to be. And people think that when I say that I am victim blaming. I'm not. I'm about victim empowerment. And one of the ways to empower victims is by giving them responsibility over their life and their well-being. That's how you empower people. And you remind them, listen, these are the resources. This is the law. This is how it can help you. I had a presentation at the airport Hilton one time, and I was halfway through the presentation talking about resources, and a lady stood up and she was very angry with me. I had never met her, but I was the one there. So I was the one that was going to get it. And she says, how dare you? You have never done anything for my daughter. And I had no idea who her daughter was. And, but empathy, crisis intervention. Your training has to kick in. And after I realized what she was talking about, the end of it was that her daughter was a victim of most horrific kind of domestic violence you can imagine. In fact, her daughter was sent to the hospital by her aggressor, and she was paralyzed by this man. And the day she was released from the hospital in a wheelchair, because she couldn't move most of her body, she could talk, but she couldn't move a lot of her body. She left with her aggressor. Her aggressor came to pick her up and took her away. In fact, they moved to another state, and her mom couldn't understand for the life of her why we couldn't stop her. And I hated to tell her she's an adult and we have resources, but she has to be the one to say, I want this. By law, we cannot force her to stay away from her aggressor. We cannot. And like I said, he put her in the hospital, and even after he put her in the hospital, she left with him. And it was horrifying for me to think that night. I went home and I didn't know her, and I found myself praying for this woman because I thought the next time we hear about her, it's gonna be that maybe he finally ended her. But people will get to where you think you have a breakthrough and you're gonna save them. And there's two cases that marked me and emotionally stayed with me. Uh, a few months ago, I was talking to a police officer who also worked these two cases, and we were sharing stories, war stories, and and I was so comforted by the fact that he felt the same way. I was not alone in my sorrow. But these two cases were cases where we thought we had made a breakthrough. We were going to remove this victim from the aggressor. The state of Texas has all this funding to help you move, to help you establish yourself somewhere else. They have funding for therapy, for all kinds of counseling. And I thought we had her, and my case manager thought we're gonna save her. And then the last moment, this one girl, she didn't show up, and we called her. I called her. She called her. And the next day we called her again, and she finally answered, and she says, "Oh, I changed my mind. I'm not gonna leave. I know him better than anyone. He's not gonna hurt me. He's not gonna hurt me. He's all talk. He's not gonna hurt me." So Tuesday, she came in for the documentation. Wednesday, she was supposed to show up so we can put her on a plane. Thursday, she said she wasn't coming in. Thursday evening, my commander reminded me that I had been working almost 60 hours that week and that I couldn't work anymore. So I was going to have to be off on Friday. And you would think, oh, I have a day off. For a victim advocate, it's not, oh, I have a day off. For a victim advocate, it's, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have all this work pile up when I come back on Monday. But Friday morning, I still woke up before 5 because I'm a creature of habit. I got ready for the day. I turned on the news and I saw something very disturbing on the news. And just as the news was coming on, breaking news from the west side, I got a call from dispatch, and the dispatcher said, Gloria, I'm sorry, I know you're off, but I just wanted to let you know. I know you've been working on this case, and unfortunately, we have a 65. Code 65 is there's a death. Sure enough, he had gone to her and shot her while she was putting her baby girl in the back seat, on the baby car seat in the back seat of her car. She was heading to daycare, and then she was going to go to work, and we couldn't save her. And when I was talking to this officer, he says, Gloria, I wake up sometimes in the morning and I think how we were this close, this close. But I also think of all the people that we have helped. If we can help one, we've changed their world, and that's what matters. Again, I'm not pressuring you, but if you want to become an advocate, if you want to if you want to be uh, I didn't read all of that, but yeah, if you want to be an advocate, oh, let me tell you, it's not going to pay you well. When my husband and I were going to get married, I told him what I was going to do for a living, and I told him, baby, I'm not going to be rich. Hey, you're going to have to be the breadwinner. So advocacy is not going to make you rich, and I'm not saying it's not going to make you famous. I am known for a lot of things. Not that I am, I'm not proud of all of the things I'm known for. Um, it's going to call attention to you and to your life and to your family. Yes, it will. I'm not going to lie to you. We live in a time when people can reach us through many means. But if you have the courage, if you have the compassion, if you have the passion, if you have the drive, and if you wholeheartedly believe that you can help someone, let's do it. Let's do it. It is more rewarding in other ways. I don't know if anybody else has a question of anything in particular.
No, I think we're good. I think
Okay.
there's no more questions.
Well, if there are no more
Yeah,
questions, again, thank you so, so very much. Um,
thank you for coming. Thank you for
absolutely.
your
And
presentation.
if I can be of assistance, if you need to further the discussion, I'm available. Like I said, I'm an independent advocate now, so my time is mine. But thank you to the team at El Paso Community College who made this possible. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to Dr. Gross's faculty. Her team is amazing. Thank you all so very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. We love having you here.
Mm.
Okay, so let's see. Do you guys have any other questions so I can? So I'd like to invite you to our next TVEs. We were not going to have any TVs for Halloween, so the next TVE will be in November, November 7th, which will be over the EPCC Makerspace. Do we have any other questions? So with that, I think we can end the presentation. I did put in the Tejano passport points in the chat in case you didn't see it. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And to you. Thank you.